Mr. Barkinhammer was a quiet man. Many times he just preferred the company of a low-rate hooker and a bottle of bourbon. He often woke up hungover and unable to remember the night before. This was typical for Mr. Barkinhammer until that day that changed his life. It was a warm autumn day. Mr. Barkinhammer was out for a stroll in his favorite park. This was used as a shortcut on his way to a burger joint to get some greasy food to ease the throbbing in his noggin. What the fuck is this here? He said to himself in a strong southern drawl. Lo and behold, there was a dead body floating down the river that had washed up onto the bank in the middle of the park. The body was an old fat man. He had stretch marks around his neck and he looked like a cooked flapjack. Mr. Barkinhammer saw that the man may have been with the shits. This wasn't new for Mr. Barkinhammer, as he had also been with the shits his whole life. Mr. Barkinhammer had grown up in the Fourth Ward of New Orleans. Growing up, his papa was a thug and his mama was one of his dad's floozies. His dad was out here, like really out here. He was known to smack a bitch like cook slap rub on barbecue pork. Growing up in this environment, Mr. Barkinhammer saw everything that the slums had to offer, and they wanted none of it. Some of this may be why in his older age he stays hugging the bottle to forget the pain of the past. Mr. Barkinhammer decided to call the police after this brief pause in time which he had to reflect on his own life when he saw the body. It only took 10 minutes and the pig showed up. They asked how long it had been since he first noticed the body and if there was anything else that may have been of interest. Mr. Barkinhammer replied nay. Then out of the police wagon stepped a tall, ominous figure. It was the captain of the police force. He approached the scene, spitting out chewing tobacco like a hick. As he strolled up the fellow officers and Mr. Barkinhammer to get the details, he shouted, "Looks like we got another go rodeo on our hands, boss." Captain Platoon was an old man with a brown beard the color of gravy that had been sitting underneath an oak trees for a few summers. He had been the captain of the New Orleans police force for nearly a decade now. He was a simple man who for the most part held up the law unless he could make cash off the situation and not get caught up. As far as the pig goes, he was one of the more outstanding ones on this particular force.